Hi, this is Leilani Cawthon, your host from the Learning Council News Media and Research Organization, here to present today on the digital transition discussion for Colorado, one of our favorite places, by the way. So let's start off the day with Lisa Lund from Denver Public. And Lisa, you have so much interesting stuff going on. I want to hear sort of an overview and kind of what you want to talk about. Yeah, so let's start out with kind of where you're at now, because we've been through the pandemic for almost a year now. Tremendous numbers of changes have occurred. What are you kind of grappling with now in terms of planning, and what is sort of poked out as essential?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think we obviously, all students having devices, students having access to the internet is something that I'm sure a lot of people that are online can relate to. So we are moving with bond funds. We will be moving to all 612. We'll have a brand new device next year in Denver Public. And we'll be moving the devices down from our secondary schools to our elementary schools. We know how important it is that kids have a device. We canceled snow days this year so we could learn all the time. And so what does school look like moving forward? We spent a lot of time with broadband. We now have some broadband initiatives where we have in the far northeast part of Denver, no internet connection, even though we have internet out there. So we've been working hard with the city and the state of Colorado to move broadband forward. So that's something that we know is super important. The device doesn't help us if our kids can't access it. So I think what we're grappling with right now is we have returned to school. K-5 is back in school full time. Our secondary schools are back in school in a hybrid situation, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, depending on the school. We have all different sizes of school in Denver Public, as most people probably know. And so I think we're grappling with how do we not go back to school in the 1920s, that we continue with using technology in the appropriate manner, and how do we continue to integrate that into our lessons? Because I think right now, it's really hard for our teachers to live stream and teach in person. And so we're working through some of that right now. And I think we don't know what next year looks like. The vaccines here, a lot of our teachers have received round 1 of vaccinations here in Denver. And so, I'm not sure that in the fall, we should be returning to school. And my new mantra is we've been talking for a long time about preparing our kids for the 21st century. We have to stop saying that because I don't think we prepared our kids and we are in the 22nd century. So what does that look like for our kids in the classrooms for next year?
Yeah, and I'm sure that the inner circle planning has been fraught with tugs in different directions in terms of how you're going to do this. Like some people wanting to focus on certain PD and others wanting to focus on something else. And it's a bit of a madhouse. Can you walk us through sort of the Denver group planning things that have gone on and what's come out as importances for the group?
Yep. That's interesting that you talk about professional learning. So we're looking at that through a different lens and calling it codependence, so that we're all working together from central office, so that when we do professional learning, tech is tied in there. I work in library services as well. How do we tie library services into that as well? How does that fit into content? How does that fit in for our SEO kids, our MLE students? So making professional learning a whole year plan that we look ahead to see how do we make all these things connect for our teachers and leaders. That is our job. And if we continue to fragment professional learning, then teachers and administrators see it as we have 50 things to do when they should look at it as one seamless thing. So we've definitely been working on that. That is definitely a plan that's in the works for us. And then also just reimagining school. We've just started that. What does school really look like moving forward after the pandemic? How do we change the way that we do school? It shouldn't be, 6 hours a day in 6 classes. I think a lot of our kids like the flexibility of remote learning. How do we continue to give that as an option and not have a virtual school that you attend, but yet you can attend your own home school? What does that look like to stay remote in the future because it works for you and your family?
Yeah, those are the imaginings David from Harris Public was talking about yesterday. And Lammersville ISD in California is pretty far ahead. I think you've met some of them. Ben Faubert from their high school out there. And they've gone to the direction of let's not have just the two rail mentality. Either you're there and you're in the there-ness schedule, or you're remote and that's some sort of an online offering. But let's blend those two things together and transform the institution's model so that, let's say you're a parent who's like, my kid seems to learn better when they're sitting in their room alone and they're, but I don't want them to be a little isolated hermit. So could we make sure we intersect on the art labs, and I'll bring them to school, and the science labs, and I want them to join the football team. How do we do that sort of flexible, I'm part of the regular school, but I'm just going to not physically be there sometimes? That sort of reimagining is kind of what we're hearing the most. What are you guys kind of thinking that way?
Yeah, kind of looking at that, because I still think some, like you said, I think some of our kids maybe want to play football or come in for music class, but really I also work a job to support my family. And so I need that flexibility about when I do my work. And some of our kids are being really successful at remote learning. It's not for everyone, but for some of our kids, it's definitely been successful for them. And some kids, don't want to be bothered, and they can move at their own pace if we make it so that we give kids that opportunity in the future. Less direct instruction and more choose your own adventure, for lack of a better word, so that you can move ahead if you want to, or, study something that you're interested in that still intersects with what we're doing in the classroom. So more voice and choice, which we've always said that. But I think too, we're also centering equity in Denver Public. I think that is the cornerstone for all of our work. So how do we look at making sure that equity is at the center of what we're doing?
Yeah. And I think the interesting question of equity is a structure issue. I mean, if we talk about like systemic biases, isn't it maybe possibly true we've had a systemic bias in our very structure? And so this atomization of routes and alternate pathways and be here, be there, do this, is maybe one of the biggest equity issues we really have. And I really like the way that people are starting to think about this and change all of that and that kind of thing. So we have a question that just came in from Patrick O'Connor. Let me see if I can unmute him. Patrick, let's make sure you ask your question. Where are you? Where are you, Patrick? Or make your comment, however you want to do that. Okay, I'm going to need somebody else's help to let this person chat. Doug, can you unmute them? Okay, Patrick.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for attending this and giving us your insight. Good to see you. I just want to know what percentage of students are liking and thriving in the remote situation.
That's a good question. I don't know the exact percentage, Patrick, but we do question and answer with our teachers and students, and we just hear from a percentage of them that are liking it. And again, it's our students, probably more high school than it is elementary and middle. But again, that opportunity to still provide for my family and be successful. We also have students who have been bullied in the past, and this is an opportunity to participate in class and sometimes not be in situations that they're uncomfortable with. So some of our students appreciate that as well, Pat. I'll have to look to see what exact percentages are.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I think also I want to ask you, are your teachers noticing this new sort of differential in student personalities? Because it's been sort of forced during the pandemic to go, that kid that used to be so quiet, never raised their hands and just was so shy. They're like chatty Cathy now online. Like they're like loving this. Yeah. And then other kids who were, I hate to pigeonhole, but they were like maybe the jocks, they were like, love all of the affiliation and they're motivated by the human side. They could care less maybe about their schoolwork. They will engage in class, but they love to be around other kids. they're wilting. So
Yes.
like, some of them, I don't want to generalize, but are you hearing those stories bubble up? Like teachers are like, wow, this is happening with this kid and la, 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 and blah, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think that's definitely true for adults as well, being on Zoom we've been home for almost a year now. And so I think that there are kids who don't ever turn their cameras on, who like being anonymous, for lack of a better word. And then there's kids who they wanted to come back to school. Some of our kids were excited to come back to school. Even some of our kids in high school, they thought they would never say, we are so glad to be back in person, to be around our friends. So it's definitely, and some kids, again, like you said, don't really care and would rather be anonymous. And they can have their voice without having to be in a classroom. But we have kids who are so excited to be back in school, and our elementaries are definitely thriving coming back to school. I'm not sure any of them aren't very social. Most of our kids wanted to come back. We have a lot of elementary kids back in school. There are some who are still remote for various reasons, but the kids are super excited. I've been to a few classrooms last week, and the kids are excited to be back in school. So it was fun.
Oh yeah. It's almost like that parenting thing when you tell kids they can't have something, then they have to have it. It's a funny moment in history. And then I want to ask you also about like all your resources, because you're the director of education technology and library services. I'm sure you've gotten pelted with a bajillion calls. What does your map look like? The architecture of all your things, and what are you thinking through now with all those pieces of ed tech, and what you're missing, or what you're going to keep, what you're going to throw out?
That's interesting. So we've started that conversation as it becomes budget season time. We did move to Schoology and Seesaw this year as our two learning management systems for K-5 and 6-12. And we really did that based on our parents having a similar experience. We had a lot of trouble in the spring last year. There's 1,000 different things people are on, and parents get really frustrated. And so it was nice to have some type of centralized procedure, and that's been super successful, and we will continue that next year. We also have really seen great use from Screencastify. We use Pear Deck, as well as Newsella is for our curriculum. We have Sora and ebooks and databases, which have become one of the highest used things that they ever have. We have our best usage from our Sora and ebooks this year. That is a big way for our kids to continue reading at any point in time. So we'll start to evaluate like what's been working well, and what do we continue to use. We have a lot of other tools. We have a lot of choices in Denver Public. But those have been the things that our team has really focused on, besides Google, which we have moved to Google, and we use Google Meet as well. So we'll continue at that high level of Google usage. As everyone knows, Google just changed everything they're doing this past week. But luckily, we had already opted in to have all of our students continue to use these great products, and our teachers in Google. So I think we'll continue to look at what's next for us. What's the next thing? We explored a little around AI. We've worked with CU Boulder for our STEM program. Continuing to build out our STEM program. We realized this year we kind of took a hiatus, and that we can't share things, but hoping that will then start to move forward in the next year.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, in the time when everyone was starting to plan all of their digital lesson plans, did you sometimes feel as a management body, maybe not just you, but your heads of curriculum areas, feel like you needed to do some prescriptiveness, like we used to have in the textbook days when everybody in sixth grade math all got the same sixth grade textbook for math? Because normally when schools first launched themselves off to the precipice to do, Chromebooks everywhere and digital everywhere, every teacher sort of on their own, they're all doing different stuff. Did you start to feel that there was that need for a little bit more prescriptiveness, and what's happening on that curriculum side?
Yeah, so I think we're doing what's called lesson internalization. So somewhat a backwards plan again to look at our standards and curriculum, and how do we integrate technology and resources into that lesson so that it's not an afterthought. So how do we make sure that when we're teaching that really tech is just there and it's not like, oh, pull out your Chromebook to do X. We also have looked at, as we purchase curriculum, it's definitely going more digital. So this year we'll adopt a social studies curriculum for our 4-5, and it's online. And that's how teachers will and students will access it. Our SEL curriculum will be online as well. So I think as we start to buy curriculum, we're really looking at, do we need the textbook or can we move this online? And as we look that we will probably be really close to 1-to-1 K-12 next year, we can do that. So it's definitely all of us working together now in that coherence around professional learning and then around what we're purchasing to make sure that kids will have that same experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And probably there's so much going on right now that you have to sort of leave some parts of things alone if they're operable and not like just new year, let's dismantle everything and start over. You can't do that. It would be insane. Yeah. So it feels like you're trying to change the tires on a car that's already moving down the road constantly. Yeah. Yeah, so it's just really interesting. I want to ask you also about your parents in Denver, because my brother lived in Denver for quite a while. I love coming out there, and I always found that there was sort of there's a lot of intellectual capital in your population. It's one of the highest educated populations in America. So when you actually went to remote learning, you probably had a lot of people putting things in the soup pot because you opened the gates with all of the parents, and suddenly they're overseeing all the Zoom meetings and poking in, and kind of stuff. What really happened? Do you feel like you were able to leverage a new sort of wing of, help, or what happened with your parents?
I think for kids that have access to their parents, they're super involved, but that is not every kid in Denver public and probably not every district in Denver. And so I think when we talk about how we widen the opportunity gap, I think sometimes that can be an issue for us as well, for the parent, like you said, who's coming to my Zoom meeting or my Google Meet or popping into my classroom. And then there's kids who are doing this all by themselves. And so I think that that's been hard. And there's a difference between, having somebody sit next to me and help me when I'm a kindergartner versus having my brother or sister maybe that's home with me, helping me. So I think we see that as, those have been problems. And I think also, a lot of time on screen is something that we hear from families and parents as well. When we return to school, we won't have to use the computer anymore. Mm. I will say that some of our kids have even gotten screen fatigue. I think as we have as adults being online all the time and not having as much conversation maybe with each other. And so I think that that's been something that's bubbled up as well. And hopefully we'll get over that screen fatigue and go back to, a balance of, I still need to write and draw pictures, and I truly believe in that. But I also can do some of those things and turn them in through a screen as well. But I believe screens can be turned too.
Yeah, too much. And I think the differentiation point, obviously, and I'm sure you're talking to your teachers about this, is the difference between just raw ingestion, just sit and get, and active manipulation of some courseware program, animation, gamified math, or writing an essay, or interacting with other kids. I mean, there's a big difference between those two things. And I think the majority of the fatigue comes from just the sit and get,
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't really have anything to do with the way the device or screen time. Nope. I like to disabuse people of that because that's not necessarily true. Yeah. My generation had 8 hours of TV every day, so just saying, this isn't new. Yeah. So it's just it's a funny thing, right? Okay. So tell me anything else that just sort of struck you as interesting, along the way. Like there's probably been many moments. What can you
Wow. It's been a roller coaster, I think. I think it's hard for our teachers too. We've bounced back and forth between, in-person, remote, live stream. I have to go out because, there's a case of COVID and now we're on quarantine I think it's changed to 10 days now. It keeps, again, all those changes that have happened too. And I think the speed with which we have to make decisions that, maybe aren't in the best interest of everyone, but because we have to make decisions so quickly because everything is on this ebb and flow, I think has been super interesting this year. We always think about the students first when we make those decisions, and our teachers as well. But I just think, again, this year, I think too that technology has really, I know I've been in ed tech for a really long time, and technology, and I don't want to say the tech, but the way we teach has really changed. And I hope that we keep that we don't just go, okay, pandemic's over, put the Chromebooks back in the closet. We're just going to get out worksheets and go back to the same thing that we did before. That's what I hope doesn't happen. Like you said, screen fatigue, but we don't need to use the screen as a lecturing device anymore. We need to use it to engage our kids and give them opportunities to move forward faster. I'm sure everyone across the country, we keep hearing about learning loss and how do we accelerate learning, but we have to keep rigorous tasks in front of our kids. We have to keep them on grade level. We can't go back to teaching kindergarten skills because we think our kids didn't learn anything during the pandemic. To give our kids more credit than that. And we have to continue to put those rigorous tasks. So those are things that I think about. Like, we can't go backwards in time, and we have to keep pushing our kids forward, and we have to give them rigorous tasks. And I could use the device to do a quick 5-minute video for my students who don't understand something to watch while we all just keep moving forward. So those are things that I think about. I'm hoping that that's what it looks like in the future, that we continue to move along that trajectory.
Yeah, I totally agree. We all have to become mixologists of the way we cause interaction. Yeah. Okay, cool. So Steve, a good friend, has a question. Steve, I think Doug unmuted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you. Hi, it's Steve Goodfriend. Good to see you. You just answered my question. So, the acceleration and helping students who may be falling behind was really my question. I think you just answered that, but maybe you could expand on that, on how you might be identifying those students who are just not getting it, or slipping behind, and getting them quickly caught up before it's too late.
Yeah. And I think it's a good question. And I don't know that I have the perfect answer, but things that we're looking at, I know we do assessments along the way to make sure our kids are on track. But again, I don't think we can go back. We do need to reteach some skills. But I read an article today that kids are cheating with Chegg online. And I said, my answer to my team was, well, if I can Google the answer, am I really cheating? And so what are those important skills? I understand that if you don't know 2 + 2, we're not going to keep going down the track to get you to where you need to be for Algebra 1 and so forth. But teaching those in small chunks to kids, or having kids in my class teach to each other that skill. Lisa's really good at it. So she's going to teach Doug and Lee how to do that. And so let's put her in a breakout room or in a small group instruction in the classroom. But we can't go back and just say, okay, this kid doesn't understand X. We have to give those rigorous tasks to those kids, and then take those small group instruction time to reteach some of those basic skills or standards that we know our students don't have. But going back and thinking that our kids didn't learn anything at all this year, I don't think is realistic. And I think our kids have learned. I think we have to give our kids more credit than we give them sometimes. They're still doing things at home that are teaching them life skills, and cooking is math. And how do we incorporate some of those skills into our classroom? Or how do we let our kids move ahead too? I think it's really important. Hopefully that helps, Steve.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, Teresa, Lester made a comment, right? Education will be changing from now on. Teresa, anything else you want to add to that? I think Doug can unmute you.
No, I just see a huge change coming, and no, we can't go backwards. I think you're correct. Our children are learning from home probably much more than they can learn in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some plus points to all of this, some positives. Some families are reporting like there's more familyness now. It's like it's awesome. And then I hear from other, some of the big inner city districts that this has been a debacle. This has been like horrible for some of the kids. And they're just off grid now. And some of them won't graduate at all because they had to babysit younger kids. And so there's like, it's a weird sort of scenario.
Right.
And the thing is, learning, I keep saying this, learning is still happening. I mean, the fact that we cause learning at all right now is like kind of a little mini miracle. And paying attention of how we can capture the gift that is this moment to move ahead with the way that we're structuring towards personalizing learning for every kid. That's amazing. That's why I was always excited, Lisa, when you said you were interested in the direction that AI is going. And what is artificial intelligence? How are we going to use algorithms to change the dynamics of all the work? You shop on Amazon and there's automatic recommendations engines, all the other stuff you could possibly buy, not that you're going to do it.
I agree. And I think that's, I'm excited to see where that can take us in the future and what that can do to, again, figure out where our kids are and then, take them on a pathway of what they want to learn. Higher ed is struggling and is college, and millions of dollars in debt when some of our kids are doing some great things without all those things. So college and career, not just college for the future, I think. So.
Yeah, that's definitely come full circle, hasn't it? And I think easily there's a huge portion, I would say at least 50% of America now is in disagreement with the old ways of higher ed. Some are like stuck on I got to get the, symbol of Harvard. And others are like, what? My kid really wants to be like, a mason or they want to work with art or like they're just going to do something else. I think it's awesome because it's the truth about how different humanity is from one person to the next. They're not all the same. Not manufacturing sameness around here. What do you, stop it. So I think we really got the message of we're not all the same. And that's what we keep talking about equity. Yeah. And I think the embedding of an old system of everybody is the same is one of the biggest inequities we have. We don't talk about it enough. Why are we structured as a manufacturing line so everybody can be the same? What? Stop that. I'm excited about that. And I'm excited that you think that way and you're one of the leaders there. And, it's positive for Denver. It's that you're there. Thank you for being there. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Invited to the largest 7th grade class here at Three Oaks Middle School to see how the skills these students are learning are actually preparing them for their future.
The one word I would use to describe Codesters is powerful.
Creativity.
Light bulb.
It's exciting.
It's amazing.
Codesters has been a lifesaver that they have access to this platform and this hybrid teaching model that we're in.
Especially for a full remote and the learning management system, it fits perfectly because I'm able to teach my students and then I could track all of them in real time in the management system.
Codesters has definitely been there for me. Between the professional development classes that I've been able to take, it helps me to feel more secure.
Their confidence has grown over this semester. That's the part that I really enjoy watching.
They're really excited how much they're learning.
We actually have a lot of fun with it, especially the debugging. It's like a competition of who can figure out what the mistake is.
It's like instant feedback.
They're not just creating games, they are creating this foundation. They will truly understand Python when they're finished.
I think that it allowed them to see opportunities that they did not think were available to them before.
It will open so many doors for them in their future.
Coaster is life-changing for these students. And it's not just preparing them for the job today, but it's also preparing them for the job of tomorrow.